Thank you all for being here. My name is Wendy Goldberg. I'm the Executive Director of the Tri-Faith Initiative, and I'm so honored that all of you have joined us in this space to have this conversation today. Conversations like this are a starting point, or maybe they're everything. And creating safe spaces for us to have difficult conversations, to hear each other honestly. And so I thank you for your willingness to show up today, and to those who are here to help us understand where we are on this journey, where we're coming from, where we hope to be headed. Thank you all for your time and your intention. I think it's important to remember, as we're speaking today, some of the ground rules that we try to remember whenever we're having this kind of conversation in public, or hopefully in private, to speak in terms of I statements. You are invited to share questions that you have in the chat. And when we get through some of the initial questions that we've prepared for, we certainly will invite you to participate. I read a statement in some of my readings this week that feel appropriate. And this one little line came in through my heart, and I wonder if you'll hear it the same way that I have. It said, let's stop complaining about and maybe you could fill in the blank there, the church, your workplace, your city, your school, and let's get to work becoming the city, the school, the church that we want to be. And so I hope that this conversation is one of many that we're having, that each of us is taking personal accountability to drink from the fire hose that is presented to us in this conversation about equity and racial justice. It's not easy work, and we're about 300 years late. So let's frame it in that we have a lot to do. And I hope that while we're here to talk about what some of our institutions are doing, I hope that you leave here not pointing your finger at the institution, but looking inward to see what each of us can do, because what we each bring to this together is where we have the potential to do new things, and our world is ready for us to bring some new life and some new energy to not just the wound, but to the atrocity of what we have witnessed in our country. So again, thank you for your willingness to show up and to listen. And thank you especially to Ellen and Sharon and Abdul for your willingness to help us really unpack the very, very beginning of a conversation about what our collaborative effort could be. This isn't the first day that Tri-Faith has been thinking about the intersection of race and religion. We've been spending a lot of time in staff and in our programming and in creating a task force around race and religion. And I want to read to you the statement of need that has been developed. Tri-Faith Initiative is working closely with other community organizations and community leaders to help heal the wound of white supremacy and the history of violence against Native Americans, Black Americans, Latinos, and other communities of color today and in the past. Religion has played both an active role in combating racially motivated hate crimes and incidents, as well as actively promoting such violence and creating the conditions for which hate can flourish. Tri-Faith is in a unique position as a thought leader within the field of interfaith relations, with a variety of support locally and nationally. With that privilege, Tri-Faith will dedicate time and resources to educate, organize, and take action against racial discrimination and prejudice. Jewish, Christian, and Muslim theology speak to the need for acceptance and equity among humankind, and we can bolster faith communities to be leaders in healing the trauma in Omaha and throughout the United States. This work is incredibly difficult. even if done correctly. However, it is imperative to start the work. And so with that, I want us to hear today from some of our community leaders about their individual experience, about what they know is happening within each of our communities, and then to talk about what we can do to be proactive, to motivate change from within moving forward. So let's start with some personal experiences. And we have a tradition in Tri-Faith, just so that our speakers know the order that I'm going to ask some of the first questions. We always go in historical order. So Jewish, Christian, Muslim. So Ellen, we will start with you. And if you could share with us an experience that explains why you see this conversation around racial inequity and injustice from your lens.
Well, I became a mother to 2 Black girls, and realizing that I was responsible for making these children whole, and realizing that I had stuff in my head that was not gonna be compatible with raising 2 strong, brave, resilient Black women. And I knew, day one, that this stops now. And that's where my journey as what I call being a recovering white person began.
Thank you. Sharon, can you tell us a bit about your experience?
Yeah, lots of experience. So I think I'll just share this one. My husband and I are originally from the Chicago area, and we moved here to Omaha in the mid-90s with the railroad. And when we moved here, we were absolutely shocked at the segregation that we saw in this community. In our experience with a realtor, we had a weekend to find a house, and the realtor only would let us look in the Millard Elkhorn area. We were told we did not want to have anything to do with the Omaha public schools. And in hindsight, we realized exactly what that was, but at the time we did not, because we weren't familiar with the community. So from the get-go, as much as we have come to love Omaha, we saw the racial divide and disparity within this community, a very rich and abundant community, but we have problems here. And I can't say that segregation has gotten any better in the 25 years that we've lived here. And also I will share, I am a retired elementary school principal with Omaha Public Schools. I have served in Northeast Omaha and Southeast Omaha. So I have served in the neighborhoods and seen the disparities of access to good health, good quality food, everything like that. I've lived it within my career. And so I bring that to the table, and it's part of my motivation for leading the Racial Justice Book Group at Countryside Community Church and being interested in doing something about what I see.
Thank you. Abdul.
Thank you, Wendy. And hello, everybody. Good question. Growing up in Detroit, heavily multi-ethnic, multi-racial community, the most profound time for me, really was, 9/11 in terms of, how people viewed me after 9/11 or viewed my community after 9/11. Prior to that, Detroit, heavily ethnic, heavily multiracial. We all viewed ourselves as immigrants. So we all, had the shared experiences, but 9/11, really changed it in how, Muslims, were perceived, especially how, Muslims of, color were perceived, because that came as a double whammy. Um, and also too, have things improved? I don't think so, because, if anything, the last administration, taught us that, hate is just around the corner, and hate can spring on you at any time, without really any, provocation, you know, um, from the communities, per se. Now, I have been living in Omaha now, going on for almost 5 years. It seemed like yesterday I moved here, but to date, honestly, personal experiences, no, I have not, encountered any personal, instances of hate towards me, while living here, or back home in Detroit, other than, the, examples, I cited.
Thank you. Tell me how you have come to know the importance of allyship in racial dialogue. Sharon, can we start with you on this one?
Sure. Well, I would say I'm still learning. It's a process of understanding allyship. It's my understanding that I need to listen more. And that's part of what our Sunday Morning Racial Justice book group is the learning and the listening portion of being an ally. I also understand that that this is a white person's problem and we need to solve this. And when we're allies, it doesn't mean we're standing on the sideline cheering on our African-American brothers and sisters to solve this problem that we've created. So I've come to understand through seminars and workshops and readings the importance of allyship, but also the role of allyship, that we're to be listeners and that we're to look to solve this problem with our white Americans who have created the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Ellen.
Yeah, I back that just 100%. I mean, we've got to have allyship. It's the only way out of this. When white people are able to come to terms with the hierarchy and the construct that dictates our lives politically, economically, socially, psychologically. Anytime white people can start to come to terms with that and be courageous enough to take a look at it and to sit with the discomfort of it all, and to keep going with it, we wouldn't have race, we wouldn't have racism, we wouldn't have racial injustice, we wouldn't have systemic racism or institutionalized racism if we didn't have what came before that, and the system that built it, and that system was white supremacy and white superiority, and those words make white people bristle. But if you look at our American history, and if you revisit American history as an adult, other than, I am always troubled. I think we learn our American history as adolescents and teenagers, and you just don't have a perspective of time when you learn it. And so it all seems ancient and irrelevant. If you revisit American history as an adult and you have that perspective of time, you start to realize that slavery has only been over for 150 years. I mean, that's shocking. It's only been 150 years, and that the civil rights was in my lifetime, and the enormity of what all that means. If white people can come to terms with some of this and sit with it, white people have got to lead us out of this mess.
Thank you. Pastor Perry, I have an inkling that you have something to say.
Yes, for all of you, I'm Pastor Tracy Perry, and Minister of Worship and Congregational Care at Countryside. And what I have to say to this is that as an African-American woman, and with the Black people that I know, including clergy, it's very interesting that for white people now to be, what are they saying, woke? It took 2020, the murder of George Floyd, for white people to become woke. Trayvon Martin was murdered in 2012. Tamir Rice, a baby, was murdered. Oscar Grant, Walter Scott, Sandra Bland, Philando Castile, all before 2020. And as you had spoken to Ellen about the civil rights and all of these things, you know, that had occurred, Emmett Till. These are things in slavery and the history of it, which is the original sin, over 400 and some years. So to see all of these things and to see now with white people are coming to a place of, we'll, you know, talk about it, or we'll have book studies, or, you know, what can we do now? Police brutality is not anything new in the Black community. And for me, white people don't get a pass of saying they did not know these things were occurring, because these things have been occurring. And it becomes a thing of, you can easily switch from that and go into the white world. And that's where the white privilege comes from, right? And it's not saying when you say white privilege, because I do these talks, let's talk about it, bold conversations on race and social justice. And a lot of times with the people that I've spoken with in church and out of church, when they hear white privilege and white fragility, they automatically think racist, right? And nobody wants to be perceived as a racist, a pariah. And explaining that white privilege for you all, you will get a societal grace that I will not in my Black skin. And just being in Black skin, particularly the darker you are, you become targets of violence. So for me, it's very good to have these conversations and to go beyond the conversations, how we are going to act, how we are going to inform congregations, synagogue, mosques, and speaking to people about, if nothing else, that is God's creation, we are to be our brothers and sisters keepers. So if you see anyone oppressed, you have an obligation as leaders to speak about it, but also with your friends, family, whomever. You don't have to be on the front lines with pickets, signs, and everything, but talking to the people who are in your circle. For me, and I have children, and if I get pulled over, or my kids get pulled over by an officer that's white, I have to automatically make the assumption this is a racist. And this could go from 0 to 100. So I have to do everything to think that I can think of to diffuse the situation. My son, who is fair skinned, and this is reality, he's gonna fare better than my sons who are dark skinned with dreadlocks. But he called me one night and he said to me, he said, Mom, where's the registration? And I said, it's in blood pump, and where it always is, what's wrong? And he said, an officer pulled me over and my heart was in my throat. I'm like, where are you? And the phone dropped. And I've always taught my children, as a lot of Black people do, we teach them tactical training. You keep your wallet in the middle, you keep your registration in the middle. You don't reach across for anything. Keep your hands on the wheels. When the officer comes, you look straight ahead. Yes, sir. No, sir. Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. So all the bottom line is to get home alive and safe. So when my son that call dropped, I didn't know which way to go. I didn't know where to go, their anxiety and the fear. And then he called me back and said, "Are you okay?" And he said, "Yeah, they just pulled me over." And I said, "What was wrong?" And he said something about a tail light. Well, there wasn't anything in tail light because I had already had the car inspected. But I told him, I said, "Just come on home." And see, that's something that white people will not know, that type of level of anxiety and fear and tension that exists in the Black community right now. And look, I'm Black, I'm not speaking, I'm not the voice of Black America. I'm telling you subjectively and with the Black people I know generalized. But it gives you an understanding of what it is that goes on for us that you don't have to concern yourself with your children or yourselves. It's a different reality. So I'm glad that these conversations could be had, but I wanted to go beyond conversation. I wanted to go beyond 2020. George Floyd was horrible. Breonna Taylor, nothing happened to the officer. It is completely an unlevel playing field, never has been. But everyone has to take ownership of how do we either help this and stop this, or how have we been advocates for racism? So.
Thank you. So along that path, Temple Israel has taken some bold and courageous steps to be very transparent about an incident that we wish didn't happen, but it did. And so Ellen, you so beautifully shared Ruby's story on her trip to Israel, and many of the people here have had a chance to hear your sermon from last month. I know you've had an outpouring of response after that beautiful, brutally honest expression of your love for your daughter. How are you? You're muted. Wait.
There I am. We're doing well. Thank you for asking. Ruby particularly, I'm certainly seeing her sparkle a little. She's been on the receiving end of so many kind and loving gestures and words. And I know she has felt very buoyed by all the support. And she's realized, and we've realized, that our Jewish community has the capacity and is capable of responding to a nudge, to take a look at some things and to do better. I would like to say one thing that has bothered me since I spoke. It's not lost on me that I felt conspicuous in that, of course it was the white woman that had the microphone. Of course it was the white woman who got her voice heard. Of course it was the white woman whose family has been now on the receiving end of so much love and understanding, which we appreciate. But what I felt too was, my God, if you thought this individual story was painful, if you thought it was palpable, the pain was palpable, realize that every day in Omaha, today in Omaha, there will be hundreds of, if not thousands, of Black mothers and Black fathers and Black children working their way through this same type of incident. And they are all feeling that same type of pain and devastation and sorrow. And their voices aren't going to be heard. And they aren't going to be found on the receiving end of love and comfort and support. That's the bigger issue.
So Ellen, why did you take the microphone? What did you hope to achieve?
To build some awareness, to build some awareness, and to possibly be able to take Ruby's individual incident and let that serve to shine light on the larger issue of what Black people and people of color are living and experiencing every single day.
And what do you hope happens next?
You know, I sure hope some white people will take it, will step into the journey, step into the chasm. And it's hard and it's awful, and you have to practically run like a psychological intervention on yourself, you know, and knowing that an intervention is there to change your course. It's there to reroute you away from some patterns and thoughts and feelings and behaviors that you're doing that may not be in your best interest. And once you've had that intervention with yourself, then maybe start working a program, you know, a support program, to be a recovering white person. And when you're in recovery, when you're working a program, you keep your new goal, you keep your new ideas of who you want to be and how you want to conduct yourself. You keep that goal in mind every day, and you think about what you're doing every day. I think white people are hoping that, you know, there's a couple of books they can read, or a program they can attend, or a seminar they can go to, and then it'll be better. And there just is no easy, quick fix. This is, you know, you need to sustain the will if you're going to go into the chasm and unlearn some things and learn some new things and reroute yourself along the lines of living a life that will make a difference.
Thank you. One more very pointed question to you, Ellen, and then we'll come back to the larger conversation. Surely this wasn't your first encounter with racist behavior, and you are so educated and so resilient, so able to be open and forgiving. So much grace to be able to witness and walk beside you in any way over, you know, 20 plus years of building community and watching what you've done here. But you told me personally last week a story about when you go to the cemetery for Temple, which is on the north side of town, and how you process some feelings about that. And I'm wondering if you could shed some light on what that experience or experiences like that look for you. How do you process your own thoughts about race and racism? What you find in your head that you wish weren't there?
You know, when I'm processing all this, I try to keep my eye on the white piece, because that's where all this is coming from. The white people and the white system in place is what's doling all of this out. So I just try to keep my eye on the white piece and just how the system is working and how it's all rolling out for us. I talked to you about the cemetery. Through the years, Jeff and I have done some bobbing and weaving, you know, when it comes to conversations, when we hear people talking about going to the cemetery or having been to the cemetery. And, you know, we just kind of started to move away from those conversations, because sooner or later somebody was going to say something disparaging about the neighborhood. And that always just felt just so wrong and so awful to us, that to think of driving through the neighborhood to get to the cemetery, to think of people doing that disrespectfully or looking around them and maybe thinking these homes and yards seem neglected and unkempt. And in my mind, I think, oh my God, these are people's homes that are living and loving. And maybe some of the people behind some of the doors feel neglected and unloved. And just knowing that there's people that drive through different streets and neighborhoods in North Omaha and are looking over their shoulders and are worried about their surroundings, it just makes me insane. It makes me crazy that the arrogance to be in someone else's neighborhood and home, and the arrogance to be thinking, I got to be checking over my shoulder. I don't know. We got a lot of work to do.
Thank you. We're going to turn next to learn a little bit about what each of the communities on the Tri-Faith Commons are doing. Ellen, could you tell us a little bit about your understanding of Temple's effort?
Yeah, we've launched our racial justice initiative, which is providing, places and spaces for our congregation to start learning and thinking and paying attention to different issues in relation to racial justice, diversity, and equity. We did our first major program, which was naming and framing racism. You could pick a book, a podcast, or a movie, and then we would take that in and then come together in small groups and discuss. We worked with the Union for Contemporary Arts and went through the Undesign the Red Line project. Harry Thomas, who's the director of DEI for OPS, spoke last month, and Preston Love is going to be speaking on May 6th over the noon hour. We had a sermon series featuring Jews of color and their experience, and we're going to be looking at some policy and practice changes at Temple. The sky is the limit. We can do any kind of programming and have any speaker and provide any learning opportunity that would provide an opportunity for people to learn and think and grow.
Thank you. Sharon, can you give us some framework for what's going on at the church?
Sure. And I want to say, anybody else from Countryside who wants to jump in, because I'm just another voice from the congregation, and I'm not the expert on what we're doing. I've only been a member of the congregation about 4 years. I can tell you that when my husband and I were looking for a church home, there were two things that drew us to Countryside. The first was that it was becoming the partner for Tri-Faith, and that was a huge draw for us, and that was important to us. But secondly, when we attended the first service, we learned that they had a racial justice book group. And I thought, well, okay, this sounds like an activist church, great. And I got involved with that. So Countryside has been doing racial justice studying and trying to learn and understand things more for several years. And frankly, the United Church of Christ, our denomination, it's actually in our mission statement that we seek justice for all. It's in the mission statement of our denomination. So it's in our DNA, is what I would say. What I love about our Sunday morning racial justice book group, and I know people can get that's book groups. It sounds sort of cliche and all that stuff. Bunch of white ladies and men reading books. But the two books that we have read specifically that help us, one is Cast by Isabel Wilkerson. First of all, we seek African-American authors. And her book is just phenomenal. If you have not read that book, I recommend you do. And the second one that we're going through right now is The New Jim Crow. This is written by Michelle Alexander. It was written 10 years ago, a decade ago, and it couldn't be more applicable. And what she talks about is our justice system specifically. So when we talk about systemic racism, I understand it kind of, but I didn't understand in depth And this book, I highly recommend it, The New Jim Crow, talks very specifically about the role of the Supreme Court and rulings that have gone on over the last few decades that have given way too much power to prosecutors and to our police, and how that has evolved and changed basically since the Reagan era. And what that does for me personally, and I know for the people who participate in the discussion, is when somebody says, yeah, we have systemic racism, I now know some details and I know what I should be advocating for beyond changing the system. So I guess that's one part of it. So the racial justice book group is something I'm intimately involved in. The other thing is I was on the board of Christian Outreach, and the board of Christian Outreach for us decides our monthly box donation, who will be the recipient, and also our holiday special offerings. Easter, Christmas, we collect special offerings, and they go to a community organization doing good in our community. And I realized, and this was last year now that we made the decision, I realized we really hadn't done anything for our African-American community within Omaha. And so we looked at what was available, and 100 Black Men was chosen as the recipient of our Easter offering because it's a wonderful mentor program that works to support our African-American males in the Omaha community. So those are just, I guess, a few examples of what we're doing. We've done more. I don't want to do a list, and I don't want to make it sound like we're great. We realize that we have a lot of learning and doing to do. But before you can put your foot forward and do, I think you need to be educated.
Mhm.
You need to make sure you're not making something worse. You don't just do for the sake of doing so that you feel self-righteous about what you're doing. We need to make educated decisions and know what to advocate for to really help fix the situation.
Thank you. Abdul?
All right, thank you. I was just unmuting. At AMI, AMI is a multicultural, multi-ethnic, racial, religious organization, a partner of Tri-Faith. And religiously, in the Quran, it states in chapter 49, O mankind, we have created you male and female and appointed you races and tribes so that you may know one another. Surely the noblest among you in the sight of God is the most God-fearing. I chose this chapter and verse because, this one is, revealed to a, Arab society at the time in the, Arabian Peninsula that practiced, economic stratification, ethnic stratification, prejudice, towards, races. And with this, verse, and with the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, Islam took steps to eliminate discrimination and racism, and called on its believers, that the most righteous among you are those who do good deeds, such as, charity, helping your neighbor, loving your neighbor, community work, doing the right thing, etc. Now, does racism exist in the Islamic world and Arab world and Middle East? Of course it does. Okay, is it supposed to? Absolutely not. Now, what we at AMI, organizations are like, people, okay? We have to self-reflect. We have to look within ourselves, to see, what is working, what is not working, how can we, self-improve. About a week or two ago, 3 of us were invited from AMI to attend and to take part in a panel presentation about race and religion with PayPal and their employee resources group. I had the privilege of attending with Olfa Khayati, I think she's on the call today, and ML Alexander. And, we were joined by 2 others from Ireland. It was a panel presentation, to talk about, race, personal encounters, personal, experiences. But what I took from that is, even though at the mosque, we are multiracial. So, I think a dialogue needs to start at the mosque as like a welfare check for our congregants. Also too, how can we help our own people? Because we can't help Temple or we can't help Countryside unless we start helping our own people. Okay, so it's like, charity begins at home. So, other than that, when you walk into our mosque, on a Friday prayer or, pre-COVID during the, holiday prayers, you walk in and you see a multitude of colors, a multitude of hues, a multitude of, ethnic nationalities. And in fact, we are home to, I would estimate, over 35, different nationalities in different countries. So we need to do our part more to, have that discussion, however uncomfortable it is, with our congregation, to ensure that we hear them. Okay. Yes, we see our people on Friday, okay, Friday prayers. Yes, we see them on the holiday prayers, but we need to know more of them and help them in their daily lives. How we're going to do that, that is open for suggestion from the board and the congregation members.
Thank you.
That's.
Thank you. So Tri-Faith has started a task force that brings together the work of all of the congregations and some community partners as well, to do education and advocacy, to host difficult conversations and beautiful conversations, to elevate the narratives and stories of people who are other, religiously other, racially other, et cetera, so that we can amplify the voices of people of color in particular, to be able to not show up and say, here's our version of what we imagine the next step is, but instead to really deeply listen to what the needs are in our communities, in our city, in our country. And so really thinking about how you might be interested in in collaborating with us as an individual. We'd love to hear from you. I'd love to invite anyone who's here with a question to add your question into the chat. And I'm particularly interested to know from you, Ellen, or Bob, Haley, others who are on the call, what do we know is not working? What are the things that we perhaps know we need to avoid?
Can I
Please.
speak to that, Wendy? Well, one of the things that I'd like to say is not working is putting our head in the sand and ignoring and pretending it isn't there. And I'm going to talk nationally for just a minute. If anyone listened to the president's speech last night, and then the rebuttal from the opposite party, they had an African-American senator, Timothy Scott, I believe was his name, speak, and he proclaimed that this is not a racist country. And that is the new stance from that party, that this is not a racist country, and that anyone who claims that it is just seeking to divide us. That's the new stance. And so I think that it's important we be aware of, I'm not trying to be political here, but I think that we be aware of the climate and the things that are being said out there within the national context, because tri-faith in our congregations, we don't exist in a bubble. We exist within the context of our local community and then, of course, the greater community. So that's one thing. And the second thing I wanted to say, is we need to not ignore problems that we see within our school systems. And I'm thinking specifically of the Omaha World Herald article this morning, if anyone read it, about West Side. And West Side High School had students reenact the murder of George Floyd for entertainment and put it on Snapchat. And now West Side's dealing with that. But that says something, right, about our community. And it's a wake-up call. that sounds silly for me to say that's a wake-up call. We've had a million wake-up calls, but it's another one. And it just seems like everything's coming to a head, that it's time to educate, put it within our curriculum. We can't ignore racism outside of the school setting either. I think that that we need to be purposeful in how it is taught in our curriculums in the schools.
Wendy, if I can add something too.
Please.
Is that, I think that, we need to, feel the hurt and acknowledge the hurt as if it was our own hurt, as if we were being hurt, because we can no longer look at a traffic stop and say, okay, that's not one of us. No, I mean, that is us. So I think once we make inroads into feeling each other's pain as our own pain, then this starts to heal, in my opinion.
Wendy?
Yes, please.
Sharon, I absolutely thank you about bringing up with the education, because Black people, people of color, we know, Native American, we know everything about white culture, white history, right? And because it's not taught about our history, and what's probably so alarming is that there's a lot of Black children who do not know about Emmett Till, do not know about the Civil Rights Act or the Voting Rights Act. I mean, they just don't know because their history is not taught. And because it's not taught in schools, and we can't make that happen overnight, but as a tri-faith, we can absolutely teach our children and the young people about other cultures' history. We have that ability and power to do that.
How would you respond to Amanda's question in the chat? How do we encourage our communities to listen to people of color, to come to the congregation with issues that have happened within the religious community?
Does that need a little bit more clarification?
Sure.
Okay. Just there are a lot of, so my background is being a Latina Jew. I know that I've come to local institutions with issues of racism, and wanting to be counted within the community. And as you can tell, there's a lot of hurt there. because I don't feel included. I gave a sermon in 2019 about racism within the Jewish community, and it was censored. So particularly Ellen, given that you've had a platform and it took a pandemic of Black death to really get institutions to focus on this, how would you encourage your religious community to listen to people of color, especially when they come with issues within their own community?
We need to unmute you, Ellen.
I said, "Oh, Amanda, I'm so sorry for your pain. You know, we have to hang in there. We have to keep trying. We have to keep learning. We have to keep listening. We have to bear this. You know, we have to bear this pain. And we can. And we have to keep trying. Amanda, hang in there. We have to keep learning. We have to keep listening. We have to keep thinking. We have to keep hearing what you just said."
Thank you.
I had an idea as you were talking, Amanda, and again, sorry to hear your pain, most definitely. But as I understand your question, it was specific to congregations. What does each congregation need to do to, when somebody of color within their congregation comes to them with a problem they've experienced there? And this is going to sound like an old administrator, but should each congregation, would it be healthy to have literally a systemic means for things to be reported and then to be worked through? Do you understand what I'm saying? Sort of an, not HR, but yeah, I'm not sure that I'm finding the words of what I'm trying to formulate here, but it seems to me there should be a formal system for people to report problems. Would that have helped you, Amanda, do you think?
Maybe. The issue is that locally there aren't as many Jews of color that participate within organized institutions. So it's very easy to kind of siphon through who could have put in some sort of complaint specifically around race and figure out who that was, right? I think in larger congregations, more diverse congregations, that's something that would definitely work. But to speak to the HR policies and the work that we do at Tri-Faith, I think it would be important for each congregation to go through those HR policies, because more than likely you have people of color working for you, and their experiences as staff is incredibly important, even if they're not a member of that congregation. So it's kind of twofold. There's some internal institutional work, just to push back a little bit on what Wendy said at the very beginning, that is about the individual, and that we're kind of looking at that more than the institution, but there is a lot of institutional things that we need to pay attention to. So when I view social change, I view it twofold. One is that personal responsibility that you have to take, but then also that systematic institutional work that has to be done locally, regionally, and nationally, right? And so those are just kind of some of the thoughts. But in terms of internal policies, I think that that's a space that Tri-Faith can help with that, particularly through our religious other inclusion framework that we have for other organizations that we help with.
Thank you. So the hour has gone very quickly. I'd like to give each of our panelists an opportunity to just share any closing thoughts or remarks, anything you didn't have a chance to say that you wish you would have. Abdul, how about if you go first?
I'll tell you, this was touching and difficult. It really was. It was a difficult, to hear the stories. And also difficult when, Pastor brought up that, this did not start with George Floyd's murder, that this has been ongoing for decades and decades and decades and hundreds, of years. And we're still, at this point where, nothing, is being done to change anything yet. Dialogues are great, but, I think we need to do more to put ourselves in the other shoes and, help to, fight discrimination, fight prejudice, because, we are better than this. We are better than this.
Thank you. Sharon?
Well, I guess what I would just like to add is I appreciate the Tri-Faith's role in this and keeping our conversations going together in the community and within our three congregations. I think what I would like to ask of the Tri-Faith Initiative and its staff is that as we go forward with these conversations, that we're careful to collect the best of the three religions and not take extremism within any of the religions and put that forward as a perspective of any of the religions. And I guess why I'm saying that, I'll just put this forward. White supremacy, unfortunately, is very associated with Christianity. The KKK carried Bibles and wore crosses, right? But anybody within the Christian church knows that that has nothing to do with Christianity or the teachings of Jesus Christ. And so I just would like us to be careful how we portray Christianity in this conversation.
Thank you.
Can I ask one question? And I know we've talked about, other ways in the conversations and book studies and everything, which is good. But what is the Tri-Faith Initiative going forward? What are the goals to be proactive beyond the conversations? The conversations are very helpful because it absolutely provides education, but beyond that.
That's at least a whole nother hour. So because we're at the time, I do want you to know that we do have a task force. We are working actively with the university on research. We're looking to host a conference on the intersection of race and religion, and we have gotten our initial funding for that to bring thought leaders from across the country. And we are actively engaged with the for-profit community to look at issues around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how religion intersects with the conversation of race. So, so much. Ellen, I want to make, and please, we'll watch and we'll continue to have more, but Ellen, any last thoughts? Are you there, Ellen? Did you hear me, Ellen? Do you have any last thoughts?
Oh, I did not hear you. I'm sorry. Yeah, my last thoughts would be with what you started on, the community that we dream of or that we imagine. And I thought, the community I dream of is one in which those among us who feel marginalized or disenfranchised are able to feel loved and inspired and protected and supported. Imagine if all of the people among us who feel marginalized and disenfranchised were free to tap into their creativity and their talents and their potential, other than the time they have to spend on just surviving. What if we had a community where people of color felt loved and protected? That would be my dream.
Sounds like a prayer. Thank you all for joining us today. There is a link in the chat. We would love to have your feedback. Thank you again to Sharon and Abdul and to Ellen, to all of you for showing up today, for Amanda for your leadership and your bravery. I hope we'll see you again to continue this conversation soon.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Very worthwhile.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. And Pastor Tracy, what a pleasure to meet you. Can't wait to be working with you. Very excited.
Likewise. Thank you.